The crimson warning lights bathed Commander Kethril, Vanex's face in hellish shadows as another section of the Meridian's edge collapsed behind them. His cybernetic arms sparked, half severed from the last hegemony assault, and the taste of copper filled his mouth. Around him, the bridge crew abandoned their posts, one by one, some fleeing to escape pods, others simply vanishing into the maze of corridors that honeycombed the dying ship. "Sir, hull breach in sections 12 through 18. Lieutenant Fora Quillen's voice cut through the chaos, steady as bedrock, despite the mayhem erupting around them, while others stumbled over each other in their panic. She remained locked at her station, fingers dancing across holographic displays that flickered like dying stars. Kethril watched his senior staff beings, he'd trusted with his life for 3 years, stream past without so much as a backward glance. Captain Welvon, his second in command, had been the first to reach the pods. Navigator Greases hadn't even bothered with farewells. The engineering crew had vanished the moment the hegemony dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace. But Fiora remained, the human barely 25 standard years. A species most of the galaxy considered little more than clever primitives, stayed hunched over her tactical display as another plasma torpedo rocked their vessel. Her auburn hair had escaped its regulation bun, and a thin line of blood trickled from her temple where falling debris had caught her. But her pale green eyes never wavered from the readouts scrolling before her. "Fiora," Kethril's voice came, out as a growl, distorted by the respirator, keeping his damaged lung functional. "The escape pods are 40% depleted and falling fast," she interrupted, not looking up. "But I've found something in the sensor logs. The hegemony formation, a gap in their interdiction field. Small window, maybe 6 minutes before they close it." Kethril felt something cold settle in his stomach. Everyone else had seen the tactical situation and made the logical choice. Run, hide, survive to fight another day. The Meridian's edge was finished, a heavy cruiser designed for exploration, not warfare. Caught in deep space by 6 hegemony destroyers hunting for the research data they'd recovered from the Cathara ruins. But humans, he'd learned, didn't always make logical choices. "The navigation computer is fried," he said carefully, testing her. "No jump coordinates, no helm control. I can plot the jump manually." Her fingers never stopped moving. "Give me helm control through the auxiliary systems, and I can get us to the neutral zone. The data survives, the mission succeeds. The auxiliary systems are down 3 decks and crawling with hegemony boarding parties." For the first time since the attack began, Fiora looked at him directly. Her eyes held no fear, no resignation, only the cold fire he'd seen in humans when they decided the impossible was merely inconvenient. "Then we'd better hurry." The ship shuddered again, and Kethril heard the distant scream of atmosphere venting into space. Every rational voice in his head screamed at him to follow his crew, to the pods, to accept defeat with dignity. But something about the way Fiora gathered her equipment, methodical and certain, made him remember why he'd requested a human tactical officer in the first place. The galaxy called them crazy, unpredictable, dangerous, standing in his dying ship's command center, watching Fiora check her sidearm with the casual precision of someone preparing for a morning walk. Kethril finally understood what the galaxy feared about humanity. They stayed when everyone else ran. The corridor leading to auxiliary control resembled the aftermath of an orbital bombardment. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly amber, and the deck plates buckled underfoot where plasma fire had melted through 3 layers of hull plating. Kethril's damaged cybernetic arm hung useless at his side, but his good hand gripped his pulse rifle steady enough. Fiora moved ahead of him like a ghost, her smaller frame allowing her to slip through gaps in the twisted metal that would have trapped his bulkier Calarian build. She'd produced a combat knife from somewhere, not regulation issue, but the kind of blade that suggested she'd seen action before her assignment to the Meridian's edge. Motion sensors picking up 8 contacts ahead, she whispered, tapping Her tactical scanner. Hegemony assault troops, probably securing the auxiliary systems to prevent exactly what we're trying to do. Kethril studied the scanner readout and felt his heart sink. Hegemony assault troops were genetically modified killing machines, each one worth 3 regular soldiers. 8 of them in the confined space of auxiliary control would be a slaughter. We need another route, he started to say, but Fura was already moving. She'd spotted something he'd missed, a maintenance shaft access panel hanging open, its interior dark as the void between stars. Without hesitation, she slipped inside, leaving Kethril to follow or abandon the mission entirely. The shaft was a nightmare of sharp edges and jury-rigged power conduits, barely wide enough for Kethril's shoulders. Behind them, the sounds of the hegemony boarding parties grew louder, boots on metal, the whine of energy weapons charging, the harsh barking of orders in their guttural language. Here, Fura's voice drifted back through the cramped space. She'd found an access point directly above auxiliary control, and through the grating, Kethril could see the 8 hegemony soldiers positioned around the control consoles like they were expecting company. They'll cut us down the moment we drop through, he pointed out. Fura's smile was sharp enough to cut hyperspace. Not if they're looking the wrong way. She pressed something into his hand, a military-grade flash grenade, the kind that could blind an entire squad for 30 seconds. But that wasn't her plan. Instead, she pulled out her personal communicator and began programming something into its memory core. "What are you doing?" "Calling for backup," she said, then dropped the communicator through a different grating, 20 meters down the corridor. The device hit the deck plates and immediately began broadcasting a distress signal, not just any signal, but a perfectly crafted fake emergency beacon, claiming to be from escaping crew members trapped in the lower holds. Within seconds, 6 of the 8 hegemony soldiers were moving to investigate, leaving only 2 guarding the control stations. "Humans lie very well," Kethril observed. "It's not lying," Fura replied, pulling the pins on 2 grenades simultaneously. "It's tactical misdirection." They dropped through the grating, like vengeance itself. The first hegemony soldier never saw them coming. Fura's knife found the gap between his helmet and gorget before he could turn around. The second managed to get his weapon halfway up before Kethril's pulse rifle burned a hole through his chest plate. But the other 6 were already returning, alerted by the sound of weapons fire. Fura's hands flew over the auxiliary control interface, trying to reroute helm control to the bridge, while plasma bolts began chewing through the bulkhead around them. "How long?" Kethril asked, returning fire through the doorway. 2 minutes to establish connection. Another minute to calculate the jump coordinates. 3 minutes. The hegemony soldiers would breach their position in 30 seconds. "Fura," he said quietly, still firing. "When I was a cadet, they taught us about acceptable losses, strategic withdrawals, the mathematics of sacrifice." Her fingers never paused on the controls. "What's your point, Commander?" "My point is that humans apparently failed those classes." She laughed, actually laughed, as plasma fire lit up the corridor outside. "We never took them. We figured if the math said we should quit, the math was probably wrong." The first hegemony soldier appeared in the doorway, and Kethril's next shot took him down. But there were still 5 more coming, and his rifle's power cell was nearly drained. That's when Fura did something that would have gotten her court-martialed in any sane military organization. She grabbed a plasma conduit with her bare hands. The plasma conduit shrieked as Fura tore it free from its housing, raw energy coursing through the metal like liquid lightning. Her gloves smoked, and Kethril could smell burning flesh, but her grip never wavered. She'd turned herself into a living weapon, wielding enough power to level half the deck. "Fura, that'll kill you, maybe," she said through gritted teeth, sweat beading on her forehead from the pain. "But it'll definitely kill them." The remaining hegemony soldiers rounded the corner in perfect formation, weapons raised and ready to finish the job. They saw the damaged Calorian commander with his nearly depleted rifle, calculated the odds, and prepared to advance. They didn't see the human holding a plasma conduit until she stepped into their line of sight. The first soldier tried to dive back around the corner. The plasma stream caught him mid-leap, and he simply ceased to exist in a brief flash of superheated particles. The second managed to get off one shot before the energy tore through his armor like it was made of paper. The third, fourth, and fifth didn't even have time to register what was happening. But plasma conduits weren't designed to be handled by living beings. The feedback surge that followed the discharge sent Fiora flying backward into the bulkhead with enough force to crack the metal. She slumped to the deck, her hands a ruin of burned flesh and exposed bone, but her eyes remained fixed on the control panel. "Status," she whispered. Ketherill rushed to the controls, his functioning hand dancing over interfaces he barely understood. The human had somehow managed to reroute helm control to the bridge and establish a link to the navigation computers. Backup core. Numbers scrolled across the display. Jump coordinates, power distribution, engine status. "It's working," he said, amazement coloring his voice. "You did it. Helm control is transferring to the bridge now." Fiora tried to smile, but blood frothed at the corners of her mouth. Internal injuries from the impact, probably severe. Good. That's good. The ship shuddered around them as the hegemony vessels resumed their bombardment. But now, they had options. Ketherill activated his comm unit, connecting to what remained of the bridge crew. "This is Commander Vanix. I need immediate medical assistance. In auxiliary control, and prepare for emergency jump in 90 seconds. Static answered him. Then, finally, a voice he didn't recognize, probably some junior technician who'd been too scared to abandon his post. "Sir, this is Ensign Nix. Medical teams evacuated with the escape pods. And sir, you should know, the jump coordinates Lieutenant Quillin programmed. They're not to the neutral zone." Ketherill felt ice form in his veins. "Explain." "She's plotted a course directly into the hegemony home system, sir. Right into the middle of their primary fleet." He looked down at Fiora, who was struggling to keep her eyes open. "Why?" he asked softly. She coughed, speckling the deck with blood. "The data, from Kithara. It's not just archaeological records. It's weapon scheme, ancient technology that could, could end the war. So you'd take it to them?" "No." Her voice was barely a whisper now, but her eyes burned with the same fierce determination he'd seen on the bridge. "I'd take it to us. The hegemony home system has something the neutral zone doesn't. The quantum communication array that connects to every human colony ship in the galaxy." Understanding dawned on him like a supernova. The humans hadn't been exploring for new worlds or scientific knowledge. They'd been preparing, building a network, creating something the galaxy's established powers had never seen before. Species that could coordinate across vast distances, share information instantaneously, respond to threats with unified purpose. "You're going to broadcast the weapon schematics to every human settlement in known space," he said. "And a few in unknown space too." She managed that sharp smile again. "We've been busy since joining the galactic community." The ship groaned around them as the jump drive began its charging sequence. 60 seconds until they either escaped to safety or jumped directly into the heart of enemy territory with information that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. "The hegemony will try to stop the transmission," Ketherill pointed out. "Let them try." Fiora's eyes were closing, but her voice carried absolute certainty. "Humans are very good at staying connected." 30 seconds to jump. Ketherill gathered the broken woman in his arms, careful not to aggravate her injuries further. She weighed almost nothing. How could something so small contain such devastating stubbornness? "Why?" he asked one more time. "Why didn't you leave with the others?" Her answer was so quiet he almost missed it over the sound of the charging jump drive. "Because leaving is what they expect us to do." The universe folded around them, and the Meridian's edge vanished into hyperspace. The Hegemony home system was a fortress carved from the void itself. 36 orbital defense platforms bristling with enough firepower to sterilize continents, patrol fleets moving in perfect geometric formations, and at the center of it all, the Nexus Station, an artificial moon that served as both military command and the quantum communication hub for half the galaxy. The Meridian's edge dropped out of hyperspace directly into this hornet's nest, her hull scored in bleeding atmosphere, her weapons offline, her crew reduced to one dying human and a Kylarian commander who was beginning to understand why his species had legends about the madness that lurked between the stars. Proximity alarms are going crazy. Ensign Nix's voice crackled over the comm from his position at the sensor station. I count 47 vessels within weapons range, and they're all turning toward us. Kethro carried Fura to the bridge, settling her gently into the navigator's chair. Her breathing was shallow, labored, but her eyes remained fixed on the tactical display showing the quantum communication array at the heart of Nexus Station. How close do we need to get? He asked. She lifted one ruined hand toward the controls, and he helped guide her fingers to the transmission panel. 200 kilometers. Standard broadcast range for military-grade equipment. We're currently 800 kilometers out, and they're launching interceptors. Then we'd better fly fast. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, taking tactical advice from a human who could barely speak, preparing to fly a crippled exploration vessel through the most heavily defended system in hegemony space. Every tactical manual ever written would classify this as suicide, but humans, he was learning, had apparently never read those manuals. Ensign Nix, he called over the comm. Transfer all remaining power to engines and forward shields. Everything else goes dark. Sir, that includes life support. Do it. The bridge lights died, leaving them in the amber glow of emergency power. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making Kethrel's stomach lurch, but the ship's acceleration increased dramatically. They began closing the distance to Nexus Station as the first wave of hegemony. Interceptors reached weapons range. Energy bolts filled the space around them like deadly fireworks. The forward shields flared and sparked under the assault, but held. For now. 400 kilometers, Nix reported. But shield generators are overloading. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they fail completely. Fiora was working with the transmission equipment, somehow managing to operate the complex controls, despite her injuries. Data flowed across her screen, not just the Cathara weapon schematics, but something else. Something that made blood run cold when he recognized what he was seeing. Fiora, that's classified intelligence. Fleet movements, defense patterns, strategic assessments, human intelligence. She corrected, blood staining her lips. Gathered over the past 5 years by human explorers and researchers throughout the galaxy. We've been mapping everything, Commander. Every military installation, every trade route, every weakness in every major power's defenses. You've been spying. We've been learning. Her fingers found the transmission controls, and now we're sharing. 300 kilometers. The hegemony interceptors were joined by larger vessels, destroyers, cruisers, even a battleship moving to intercept their course. The quantum communication array loomed ahead, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with the data streams connecting dozens of star systems. 250 kilometers. Forward shields at 15%. Fora's transmission package was ready weapon schematics that could revolutionize military technology. Intelligence reports that would expose the strategic weaknesses of every major galactic power, and something else. Something that made Kethril realize the scope of what humanity had been planning. Colonization data, he whispered, reading over her shoulder. Habitable worlds, resource surveys, population projections. How many human settlements are there really? She managed a weak laugh. More than anyone knows. We're very good at staying hidden when we want to. 220 kilometers. A plasma torpedo got through their failing shields and carved a chunk out of the ship's port side. Atmosphere vented into space, and Catherall could hear bulkheads collapsing somewhere in the lower decks. 210 kilometers. Shields failing. Another hit, this one to the starboard engine. The ship lurched, her acceleration dropping as power systems failed throughout the vessel. They were still closing distance, but barely. 205 kilometers. The largest hegemony battleship had moved to block their path, its massive bulk filling the view screen. Weapon ports along its hull began to glow as it prepared to deliver a killing blow. 200 kilometers, Nix whispered. Now Fiora breathed and pressed the transmission control. The quantum communication array received their signal and, following standard protocols, began relaying it to every connected system in the network. But the hegemony operators quickly realized what was happening and began emergency shutdown procedures. Trying to sever the connections before the data could propagate further, they were 30 seconds too late. Across the galaxy, on every human, colony ship, research station, and hidden settlement, communication arrays came alive with incoming data. The weapon schematics, the intelligence reports, the coordinates of undiscovered worlds, rich with resources, and something else. Something that would change everything. The activation codes for sleeper agents embedded in every major government, military organization, and corporate entity in known space. Humans, it turned out, had been very busy indeed. The battleship's main guns were cycling to fire when every screen in the hegemony command center simultaneously went dark. For 3 seconds, silence reigned across the most secure military installation in their empire. Then, in perfect synchronization, every display activated with the same message, in flawless hegemony script. Hello, we need to talk. Admiral Krekstar, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony Defense Fleet, stared at the message with the kind of cold fury reserved for impossible things. His command center housed the most advanced security systems in the galaxy, protected by quantum encryption that would take centuries to break. The message had appeared anyway. Communications blackout, he ordered. Full spectrum jamming. I want every transmission in or out of this system completely. The message changed. Admiral Your wife Illith is currently at the medical facility on Hegemony Prime, undergoing treatment for Corellian fever. Your daughter Zess just passed her military academy examinations with honors. Your son Drex is stationed aboard the destroyer Vengeance, in the Outer Rim, where he recently distinguished himself in action against raiders. The Admiral's 3 hearts stopped beating simultaneously. Your family is safe. They will remain safe, but we need to talk. Across the system, similar messages appeared on every military vessel, every command station, every secure facility. Not threats. The humans were very careful about that, but demonstrations. Proof that their intelligence network had penetrated, deeper than anyone had imagined possible. On the dying bridge of the Meridian's edge, Fiora watched the tactical display with satisfaction, despite the pain racking her broken body. The Hegemony fleet had stopped firing, their weapons still trained on the human vessel, but held in check by the implications of what they were witnessing. How? Catherall asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 5 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the galactic community, everyone assumed we were primitive, barely space-capable, no threat to established powers. Fiora coughed, speckling her lips with blood. They were right about being primitive, but they were wrong about being harmless. The main display showed data streams flowing through the quantum communication area, not just to human settlements, but to every connected system in the galaxy. Financial networks, government databases, military communications, civilian information services. Humanity had spent 5 years quietly infiltrating everything. Your people aren't explorers, Catherall realized. You're an invasion force. No. Her voice was growing weaker, but her conviction remained absolute. We're survivors. Every human settlement, every research station, every diplomatic mission has been preparing for the day when the established powers decide. We're too dangerous to tolerate. On the tactical display, red indicators began appearing throughout the galaxy as human assets revealed themselves. Not weapons or military bases, but something far more devastating: information networks. Within minutes, every major government would receive detailed intelligence reports about their neighbors' military capabilities, trade vulnerabilities, and strategic weaknesses. "You're starting a war," Kethril said. "We're ending one." Fiora's eyes were closing, but her voice carried the weight of certainty. The galactic powers have been preparing to divide human space between them for months. The hegemony, the Trade Federation, the Stellar Consortium, they've all agreed that humanity needs to be managed before we become a threat. The communications panel chimed with an incoming message. Admiral Krekstar's face appeared on screen, his expression carefully neutral despite the chaos erupting around him. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Krekstar of the Hegemony Defense Fleet. You have made your point. What are your terms?" Fiora smiled, and for the first time since the battle began, it reached her eyes. "Tell him, Commander." Kethril found himself speaking for humanity, a role he'd never expected to play. "Admiral, the terms are simple. Humanity requests formal recognition as a sovereign power with rights equal to any galactic civilization. We want trade agreements, defensive pacts, and most importantly, we want to be left alone to develop as we see fit. And if we refuse, then every government in the galaxy learns exactly how vulnerable their neighbors really are. Wars have started, over much smaller intelligence leaks than what we've prepared." The Admiral's expression remained carefully controlled, but Kethril could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could expose military secrets, destabilize governments, and turn allies against each other without firing a single shot. "You're blackmailing the entire galaxy," Krekstar observed. "We're negotiating," Kethril corrected, "from a position of strength." The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of failing life support systems and Fora's labored breathing. Through the view screen, the massive hegemony fleet remained motionless, weapons powered but not firing. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as human sleeper agents revealed the depth of their infiltration. "There's something else," Fiora whispered, her voice barely audible. "The weapon schematics from Cathara, they're not just weapons. They're terraforming technology, planetary engineering on a scale that could transform dead worlds into garden paradises." "Why does that matter?" "Because we're not just negotiating for humanity's survival." Her eyes opened one last time, burning with the fierce determination that had brought them across the galaxy. "We're negotiating for everyone's future. The ancient Kithara didn't build weapons to destroy worlds. They built them to create them." The implications hit Kethril like a physical blow. Terraforming technology that advanced could solve resource shortages, end territorial conflicts, make war itself obsolete by providing unlimited living space for all galactic civilizations. Humanity wasn't just blackmailing the galaxy. They were offering to save it. Admiral Krekstar stared at the data streaming across his personal display, his tactical mind struggling to process the implications. The weapon schematics humanity had stolen from Cathara weren't weapons at all. They were blueprints for atmospheric processors that could transform barren rocks into habitable worlds in decades rather than millennia. "Impossible," he muttered, but the technical specifications were undeniably authentic. The mathematics checked out. The energy requirements were massive, but achievable with current technology. On the Meridian's edge, Fiora's breathing had become shallow, irregular. Kethril monitored her vital signs on the medical scanner, watching the numbers decline steadily. Human physiology was remarkably resilient, but even humans had limits. "How long have you known," he asked quietly, "about the terraforming technology?" "Since we first analyzed the Cathara ruins." Her voice was barely a whisper now, about humanity's real purpose in the galaxy. Since the day I enlisted, your species planned all of this from the beginning. Not planned, prepared. She managed a weak smile. We learned from our own history, Commander. When a primitive civilization encounters advanced ones, they either adapt quickly or disappear entirely. The communications panel chimed again. This time, it wasn't just Admiral Krexta representatives from the Trade Federation. The Stellar Consortium and a dozen other major powers had joined the conference. Word was spreading through diplomatic channels with the speed of quantum entanglement. Human vessel, came a new voice, this one belonging to Prime Minister Valdris of the Trade Federation. Our preliminary analysis of your ... gift suggests these terraforming technologies could revolutionize galactic civilization. What assurances do we have that humanity will share this knowledge? Kethril looked to Fiora, but her eyes had closed again. Her breathing was so faint he had to lean close to confirm she was still alive. The responsibility for speaking for all humanity had fallen to Himicalarian, who, 24 hours ago, had believed humans were nothing more than enthusiastic primitives. Prime Minister, he said carefully, humanity has already shared the knowledge. It's been transmitted to every human settlement in the galaxy. The question isn't whether they'll share it's whether the galactic community will work with them to implement it peacefully. And if we choose not to cooperate, the tactical displays showed the true scope of humanity's preparation. Sleeper, agents in every major government, intelligence networks that spanned the galaxy, and now terraforming technology that could shift the balance of power permanently. But more than that, it showed something else, something that made Kethril understand why Fiora had been so certain from the beginning. Human settlements weren't scattered randomly through space. They formed a pattern, a network that surrounded every major power in the galaxy. If humanity chose to act aggressively, they could strangle trade routes, disrupt communications, and destabilize entire governments without ever engaging in open warfare. Then humanity develops these worlds alone, Kethril said, and in 50 years, when your civilizations are still fighting over the same scarce resources, there will be 1,000 human worlds where there are currently empty systems. The silence that followed was profound. Every species represented in the conference was calculating the same mathematics, reaching the same inevitable conclusion. Humanity hadn't infiltrated galactic civilization to conquer it. They'd done it to ensure their own survival while offering everyone else a path to prosperity. It was, Kethril realized, the most elegantly ruthless diplomatic strategy he'd ever witnessed. Commander Vanix, Admiral Krextar's voice, was thoughtful now. The tactical aggression replaced by something approaching respect. Your tactical officer. Is she speaking for all of humanity? Kethril looked down at Fiora, her face pale but peaceful. No, Admiral. She's speaking for the future. The medical scanner began emitting a steady tone. Fiora's life signs were flattering, her body finally succumbing to the injuries she'd sustained in auxiliary control. But her eyes opened one last time, focusing on Kethril with crystal clarity. Tell them, she whispered. Tell them we stayed because we believe in tomorrow. Her hand found his, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so close to death. The galaxy thinks humans are crazy because we take impossible risks for uncertain rewards. But we're not crazy, Commander. We're hopeful, and hope, ... Hope is the most powerful force in the universe. The life signs monitor went flat. Kethril sat in silence for a long moment, holding the hand of a human who had just changed the course of galactic history. Around him, the Meridian's edge continued its death spiral, her systems failing one by one. But through the quantum communication array, he could see the future taking shape. Human settlements were already beginning coordination efforts, sharing the technological specifications with trusted allies and preparing for the largest terraforming project in galactic history. The major powers were establishing diplomatic channels, negotiating resource sharing agreements, and territorial boundaries for worlds that didn't yet exist. All vessels, this is Admiral Kregstar. The announcement came through every communication channel in the system. Cease fire. Stand down to minimal alert status. We have much to discuss, and apparently, a galaxy to rebuild. Kethril activated his personal communicator, broadcasting on the emergency frequency that would reach every human settlement in the galaxy. This is Commander Kethril Vanox aboard the Meridian's Edge. Lieutenant Fiora Quillen died in service to her species and to the future of galactic civilization. Her final message to humanity: the mission is complete. You can come home now. Across the galaxy, from hidden research stations to diplomatic missions to colony ships exploring the rim territories, humanity began to reveal itself, not as conquerors or infiltrators, but as builders, as gardeners preparing to plant forests of worlds among the stars. They had stayed when everyone else ran. They had hoped when logic demanded despair. They had believed in tomorrow, even when today seemed impossible. And tomorrow, Kethril realized as he watched the first human ships begin emerging from hyperspace, was going to be beautiful in the aftermath. Historians would mark this day as the beginning of the Second Galactic Age-an era of unprecedented cooperation and expansion. The terraforming projects would transform thousands of worlds, ending resource conflicts and enabling every species to flourish. And at the heart of it all would be the memory of a human tactical officer who stayed at her post when everyone else abandoned theirs, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply refusing to give up. They called it the human miracle, but those who knew Fiora Quillen understood it was something far simpler and far more profound. It was hope, crystallized into action and tempered by an absolute refusal to surrender. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not through conquest, but through an unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And in believing it, they had made it true.